who I am and where I come from and where I hope to go. And obviously the story begins in Dublin. I was born into a working class family. The family of 10, my mum and dad made 12 and my grandmother made 13. We lived in social housing. We lived in a relatively small home, 2 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms downstairs. Do the math on where we all sat. Many of you, I'm sure, in this room would also know. But also, we spent a lot of time because Ireland at the time, in the 1950s, the 60s, and the 70s, very much like Newfoundland at the same period of time, massive unemployment, 17, 18, 19%. So consequently, lots of time on unemployment insurance, as we call it in Ireland, on the dole. So life was tough, believe me. It was tough growing up in Dublin in the 60s. But I still believe I had a wonderful, rich life, in the sense that I was educated in many ways on the streets of Dublin. I was blessed to be able to walk the streets where James Joyce walked the streets and saw many of the buildings from Ulysses and Molly Bloom and a lot of the buildings that still standing. Wonderful history in terms of Christy Brown, a wonderful author who lives just down the street from us, get wheeled around in a boxcar because he couldn't afford a wheelchair, and he wrote the famous book My Left Foot, and that movie that came from that. Brendan Bean, a working class poet, lived around the corner. We would see him every day, read his books and his plays. And also, of course, a working class poet, Patrick Kavanagh, who wrote some wonderful working class poetry. And that was the rich life that I grew up in. Even though we left school at the age of 16, we all understood there were poets and our playwrights and our musicians were. And we learned from that, and the stories got passed on down. And I can recall stories being passed from my grandmother to myself as a child and my brothers and sisters about the famine in Ireland. And the famine was only like my great-great-grandparents lived in the famine. They would pass it down as if it happened yesterday. There were 9 million people used to live in Ireland prior to the famine. 6 years later, it was 3 million. At 16 years of age, I left school, became an apprentice. The first job I got was to leave Dublin and go to Belfast, and I saw the ugly face of sectarianism right there before my very eyes. I saw colonialism and what it was doing to my country, and I saw a nation being torn apart. And there are some of the issues that have shaped my life. When I came to Canada in 1922, I actually worked in a factory in the East End. I was 22 when I came to Canada. What did I say? Oh! Thank you, mate, for keeping me honest. Jeez, I was 22 when I came to Canada. And the first union I actually joined, I helped to organize it, was what the United Steelworkers of America. I was a steelworker. I belonged to in this country was the steelworkers. They reached out to immigrants, and there was many immigrants in that factory where they organized this. And from there, a year later, I joined Ontario Hydro and became a CUPE member. So that's a bit of the sense of the history of who I am. I've been shaped by my arrival here in Canada, by being organised by the steelworkers, and being organised by CUPE, but at the same time, I'll never forget my roots, because from my roots gives me my sense of social justice. My father would always say, and drilled into us, all of us as children, have the courage of your convictions, and never be afraid to stand up and be counted. And those words ring in my ears.